Yeah. So he said that you need Kohanim and Levim to give it. I think we didn't read the last sentence, or we didn't read it well enough. So he says, even though the Torah came down into physical objects to deal legally with all the physical dealings of this world, still it has in it the higher will. So therefore, a person who is engaging in Torah, who's learning Torah, is drawing down and enlightening his soul with the higher will, which cannot be grasped. It's inside there. That's what he's saying. But you can get bogged down in the details and lose sight of the higher will, meaning that you begin to understand. It's like a person who's got nerves about halacha. So everything is exactly this way, exactly that way. And it's not that it's wrong to do that, but if you get caught up and you think that that's all there is, that's where the problem becomes a real issue, where you're missing the divine will in this. So for that he said, so for this, the Torah talks about, this is the continuation of our parsha. The continuation of the parsha talks about the Kohanim, right? It gives a list of all the Kohanim, and then your chiddush that I didn't know, that Pinchas wasn't a Kohen. It says there clearly. He's not among the 4 sons that were anointed.
You didn't tell that story, Pinchas?
Yeah.
Hashem gave him the Kohen.
Maybe I don't know. Just, in my mind, it was so strong that he's a Kohen. So the continuation of the parsha is this was actually yesterday, no? Was it yesterday's chitas? Was the Kohanim, and then he starts with the Levim, which he finishes in the next parsha. So the question is, what's the connection? Simple question about the parsha. Why do you start out counting the people, counting the people, and then he also counts the Kevin. But then suddenly you tell us everything that the Levim were supposed to do. Right? Yesterday was the Levim help Aaron in this, and they help him in that, and then we come to the whole topic of what do they actually do. And it goes on and on for another parsha, another half parsha, and so. So what's the connection? Why is this part of talking about counting them? You should have just counted them, and that was it. Why is it that when you get to the Levim and the Kohanim, you begin to describe not just how many there were, but you tell us what they do. We know what they do.
Counting them for purpose, so they'll do what they're supposed to do.
So that should have been in regard to the rest of the people also. Shefet Dan, you're the last one, so you should pick up this and that. Each one. So he says, so the Kohanim are an aspect from above to below, like water that descends from a high place to a low place. And the Levim are Gvura. The Kohanim are Chesed, and the Levim are Gvura. So Chesed comes from above to below, and the Levim, they're like fire that ascends from below to above. So why are we relating this? Ratzon, we know where it is, right? Ratzon is in the middle. It's in the middle axis. So here you have the right axis and left axis. He adds to it. You see that they do something from below to above, because when the Mishkan, when the tabernacle ceases to move, right, the Amud Anan or whatever it is rises or goes down. Stop, and you have to build the tabernacle where you are. So that's what the Levim did. פירוש, ובהכנות המשכן, כשירד בחינת המשכן ממדרגתו, תהיה הקמה על ידי הלוויים. It says it's more than that. When it descended, the pillar of fire, of cloud, some kind of mist, whatever it was. So that means that the Mishkan came down. It's like saying that until now we were traveling like in the Baal Shem Tov, pictures, like traveling above the clouds. Now we descended down. Okay, so it came down, but you can't leave it there because the tabernacle is supposed to be one notch higher than reality. So when you say that they erected the tabernacle, the Levites, you're not saying that just that they erected it, but they raised it from being too far down.
Reconnected it to the
Yeah,
cosmos.
right. דהיינו בנשמת האדם למטה. What is this? שירדה הרעתה ונתלבשה בגוף ונפש הבהמית בעולם הזה. So this happens to each of us. How? That originally the soul was above, was in a high place, like traveling in the clouds. And then it came down to be enclosed in the body. Because it became enclosed in the body and the animal soul, so it becomes weak. It becomes weakened. It doesn't connect to spiritual things. It doesn't understand. So what's the eitzah? What's the advice? So you have to awaken holy judgments. Right? Holy judgments here means from below to above, not from above to below. It's sort of like the same thing when people get engrossed in their lives and they sort of fall asleep. You have to wake them up. How do you wake them up? You excite them in some way. You have to excite them, which is probably what Hashem is trying to do to us now.
Right?
Yeah, you have to bring out the tanks. So you can have a mitzvah tank and you can have a mivtza tank, either one. But you need excitement. So it's probably the same thing that happened to people here. And Hashem is trying to excite us. והם מתחלקים לשלוש בחינות, גרשון, קהת ומררי. And there are three types of holy judgments, of holy gvura. And their names are Gershon, Kat, and Merari, the three families of the Levites. What's the Knei? We see it right away. גרשון הוא עניין מה שכתוב, גרש האמה הזאת ואת בנה, שהוא מבחינת גבורות, שאכן קוראים פרשה הזו בראש השנה, כי שמאל דוחה. So Gershon is the left side, meaning in Gvura itself we have left, right, and center. So the left side is to push away that which is negative, like dealing with the Arabs here. Why does it never work? Because there's never a separation. Not willing to talk about separation. It's very, very simple. If you don't separate, imagine that you have a barrel of apples. Right? And you don't take out the bad ones, the spoiled ones. They're all going to spoil, even if it's not their time to spoil. Even if they're not ripe enough to spoil, they'll make the others spoil. Same thing here in Israel. If you don't throw away the ones that can't live with us, if you're not willing to kill them, throw them away, whatever you want. But if you're not willing to separate them out, it doesn't matter how friendly you are with the rest. They will always fall into the lowest possible state of hatred towards you. It's just human nature. It's how things are. It's the way of the world. And because here they're afraid to do it, so we keep eating the spoiled apples all the time. Everything gets spoiled.
Rebbe says we have godless mentality.
Right.
Frightened of ourselves.
Good.
We don't believe in shit.
Good.
Real answer is that we don't believe.
So, we don't read this.
Included.
So Gershon, that's what he represents. Garesh ha'amazot b'na. How do you say Garesh?
Get rid of milk inject. Expel.
Expel. Very good. So expel this maidservant and her son. Who's he talking about? Ishmael. Does it mean that every single Arab in the world has to be expelled? No. But the ones that are the spoiled apples, they have to be taken out. They're not even put in jail. I'm not even talking about taking them out. But when you put them in jail, it just makes it worse. Because as long as they continue to be here, they convince all the rest.
Jail's the greatest OD camp that there is.
Yes. They convince all the rest that the only solution is to kill the Jews. That's the only way. The other ones, it's not clear at all that they want to kill us. It's not. But when you have those, so the same thing happens in a person's heart. If you let a little bit of evil take over, it'll spoil all of you. So a person has to have the left side of a gvura. The left side of gvura is the ability to win against, to expel the evil. Ve'ezo gibor kovesh et yitzro. And as it says, who is a gibor? Meaning a person has gvura, who has judgment. The person who can conquer his evil inclination. והוא בחינה יותר מעולה ממה שכתוב ביציאת מצרים, כי ברח העם לפי שהיה עדיין הרע בתוקפו. And this is better than what happened when in the Exodus. Because in the Exodus, all they could do was run away from evil. As they ran away. They ran away from Egypt. They ran away from their limitations. So the running away is maybe first aid, and maybe it's an emergency procedure, but it comes back to take your head off. Because if you don't get rid of the evil, it'll just make it worse. The main thing is to expel the evil from one's intestines. The evil has to run away from you. If you don't create an equation of fear with the evil, you will be overtaken and eaten by it. As it says in the blessings in Bechukosai, that 5 of you will be able to chase 100. And that's why in the future it says, Isaiah says, you won't have to run to get out of the last exile. You'll walk calmly to the exit. Why? Because we've already conquered the evil. That's why the pasuk that we just read was, Sarah said to Abraham, expel this maidservant and her son. Why is it Sarah? She is kingdom. What is he saying? He's saying it's the duty of whoever's in charge to do this. And you can't run away from it. That's what you have to do. You have to have kingdom. Kingdom means having sovereignty. You have to feel that your life is yours. That you're not going to be ruled by your evil inclination. No more. I put my foot down. That's it. That's what it means to be Sarah. Sarah means sovereignty. And who did she say this to? To Avram. Why? Because Avram, Mubchinat Chesed Elyon. Avram is all loving kindness, and he doesn't understand these things. He's a leftist Jew. That's what he is. He doesn't get it. Sad to say it about Avram. That's what Avram represents. His redeeming quality is that at least he was a prophet, and he heard Hashem say, Shema b'kolah, listen to her.
Yeah, but Avram took Yitzchak to Shechter. So it wasn't, there was.
He tried to create again. That was long before, long before. Eventually, Avram was taught also to have gvura. That's what Hashem gave him the whole thing for, to switch him from so much loving kindness to a sense of might. You can actually conquer your will. But Avram says, Lo yishma lichya lefanecha. Which is even, when you read Rashi, is in some ways, I think, I've always looked at it as Rashi is criticizing Avram. It's not Rashi. Rashi's quoting the sages, but they're criticizing Avram. What are they saying? That would it be that Yishmael should live before you? And he says, in fear of God. Ve'irat Shamayim. Ve'ira, I think he says, without Shamayim, just in fear. What's he saying? He's saying that I don't have Yira. He should have it. What do you mean? If you never taught him, because you're not that way, so how do you expect him to have it? So would it be? Right? Would it be? Because that's what this son needs. He needs some discipline. So Sarah says this to Avram. Again, when you say it about Avram, it sounds a little
Strange.
not just strange. It sounds like you're criticizing the patriarch. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But this is what Avram represents. Avram represents the higher loving kindness that has no bounds. And in higher loving kindness, everything is fine. So where everything is fine, it's like a person excuses himself. He says, It's not so terrible that I did this. It's not so terrible that I did that. You're right. You shouldn't cut your head off. You should learn to accept that you have problems. But doesn't mean that you should live with them. You should expel them. You should never give up on changing your life. You can't say, just because I don't want to live with guilt feelings, because that's the worst thing. Because the guilt feelings will just dig me deeper into the hole I'm in. And nonetheless, I still don't want to live this way. I don't want to be catering to my evil inclination. But Avram, what he represents is Chesed Elyon. Chesed Elyon has this feeling that everything's fine. Hashem can tolerate everything. It's true. The Chesed can tolerate everything. Avram can tolerate everything. So she says, Garesha Amazot Vibna, Ki lo yirash. She says you have to expel the evil, meaning the sovereignty, the Malchus. In other words, really what he's saying is, if you don't have the inner quality of Malchus, which is shiftless, which is lowliness, you can never exercise control over your life.
Why is it Malchus is ruling? Malchus is ruling.
It's very interesting.
That's
I have a friend who teaches this a lot more than I do, because he has a yeshiva, and he deals with that on a daily basis with the guys, with the boys. And so he's very much into it. He thinks about it all day long. I just heard from him. I think he's right. I just heard from him in his name. Somebody told me that he said it used to be in Chabad that nobody had to talk about lowliness because it was sort of like mother's milk. Everybody knew it. Nobody had to talk about it. And the same way we talked about patriotism. You don't need patriotism in the central command. Nobody in Chabad needed to speak about lowliness. It was the most obvious thing in the world. And now you have to talk about loneliness. Why? Because nobody even knows what the difference between lowliness and bittul is, between shiftless and bittul is. And so for that I teach hundreds of classes, and we all teach. We all try to, but something is missing. So people don't get it. We've talked about it 10 times, but it doesn't stick for some reason. I don't know why. Lowliness means you're not fooling yourself. It's like the whole Tanya. The summary of the whole Tanya is don't fool yourself. What? Not fool yourself about what? You have an evil inclination. That's what loneliness says. I am not a tzaddik. I'm not perfect. A person who can't say that cannot rule his life. The first step in ruling, being sovereign over one's life, is realizing what one's limitations are and how one is guided by or identifies with one's evil inclination. If you can't do that, you can't begin to be sovereign.
Isn't that obvious? Can't you see it with your own eyes? I mean, it's always driving you crazy.
Yeah, but in the end, what do people think? Ignore it.
People try to overcome it. People try and do tshuva.
No, they don't. They've all given up. So what do they paint themselves as? I'm close to a tzaddik. Most people, that's how they live. That's how I live. Except for the times I remember that I have to be lowly. I have to be like David HaMelech. When I make a mistake, David made a mistake. He took the Aron on a wagon instead of on the shoulders of the Levites. So what does he say? Ech yavo Aaron elai. How can the ark come to me? I don't even know the first thing. How many people say that after something happens? When do you hear that? When do you say that? When something fails, who's to blame?
Me.
Said it. So you got a little bit of the mother. So that's sovereignty. So you have some sovereignty. So you have some control over your life. But the person who can't say that and blames Hashem, blames his parents, blames his wife, blames whoever, blames the whole world.
Everybody wants shalom bayis, right?
Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah.
But when something happens to mess up shalom bayis,
Who's to blame?
me.
So,
I'm not keeping time misses the way I should be.
Okay, maybe that's also true. But that's missing a little bit of the point.
I need to do tshuva.
It's not this
If I
I
do
didn't do.
tshuva,
I have this
if I do
bad
tshuva.
quality.
Okay, so
And
if
I have to
do-
apologize for it.
So I'm saying, doing tshuva is apologizing, and if I can control it, then shalom bayis will come. I don't blame my wife.
Oh, no. But you see that half the world does, because half the world gets divorced. It's not just that
People
the
get divorced because we live in a generation
where
easy gettings.
whatever it is. In the end, they
Why
can't
do
come
Israeli
to.
drivers drive down one-way streets the wrong way
Well, it's an happen
all
that
the
much.
time? All the time. I see it all the time on the roads. Why?
Okay.
Because that's the easy way out, right? No one's
Okay.
going to see, they won't catch me, and nothing will happen. Until another car comes up to direction and smashes into it.
It's one reason why people don't come to terms with who they are. They want the easy way out. But the real reason is because they can't admit to themselves that they're to blame. They can't, people cannot see themselves as they are. They're not willing to, because they're so full of this picture that you're supposed to be perfect, that I'm supposed to be different. Take for example, something I don't even know how to even react to this anymore. All my Lubavitchers on Facebook are now reposting Lubavitchers on Facebook. There's a guy who writes for Kfar Chabad magazine. It was a decent guy.
You can't
I'm not
get
gonna
a Lubavitcher if you go
I'm not,
Facebook.
yeah, you can. I'm not going to mention his name.
Yeah.
He reposts something that a Dati Leumi friend of mine wrote. What did he write? How could it possibly be the Jews lynched an Arab? So first of all, we don't know that they lynched him because you don't see the whole picture. But believe that alone. Let's say you're right. Let's say that's what happened.
Yeah.
What are we? We're not human beings?
What happened to the Arab? They killed him?
No, of course not. But even if they did, the worst possible scenario you can imagine. So what are you saying, that Jews are not human beings? You can do what the Arabs are doing. Where was it done?
I don't know, where was it?
It was done in Bat Yam. It wasn't done in Yitzhar, where there's nothing going on, and the Arabs don't come close. And it wasn't done in Gaza, and it wasn't done anywhere. Where was it done? Where people see night after night the Arabs rioting, destroying and hurting Jews and so on. And they decided to take the simple act called revenge. And anybody who claims that Jews don't want to take revenge is lying. He's a liar. And he's going to be hurt by it 100 times more because he's putting his head into the sand. Jews are people like everybody else. If you hurt me, I want revenge. Now, you and me, we're too old. We're alta cockers. We won't do it. Okay, maybe you're a ginger. I'm too old. I'm too weak. I won't do it. I have a family. Whatever. A million mitigating things. But inside, I'm burning. So what? It doesn't mean I'll do anything. I probably won't. And on top of it, I have all my cheshbonos, shamayim, all the way that I think from heaven. They don't want me to do this. But somebody who doesn't have all this. So he's back to square one. Why is he any different than any other human being in the world whose most simple nature would be to take revenge? I don't know what the Arabs are avenging. They're not avenging anything. They're just rioting because they can do it. Because they're not met with any resistance. But why are you so surprised? Why are you posting this nonsense? How could it be that... What do you mean, how could it be? He's a human being like everybody else.
What did you answer this guy?
That he's a human being. And he feels that nothing's being done. So of course he's going to blow up. Is it right? It's not right. But to ask how could it be? What are you living in some la la land? Yeah. The moment you do this about everything in the world, you lose sovereignty. And sovereignty means that you can't control anything because you're not willing to face the facts. How are you going to control them? How can you deal with your evil inclination? That makes it worse. Of course the people want revenge because there's no vessel for what they feel. You have to create a vessel. When there are strong emotions, the duty of any decent government is to understand that they have to create a vessel to contain those emotions. And when you don't contain a vessel, we don't create a vessel that can contain it, don't be surprised that it's going to spill over. So where did it come from? It came from the same place that every single human being came from his mother's womb. That's where it came from. It's from human nature. Just because we have a Torah, so what? So the Torah suddenly changed our... we're not human anymore? Nonsense. Not to mention that these people, most of them don't have Torah because they're very simple people. So thankfully, they remind you once in a while that there's an evil here. Anyway, so you have to feel like Sarah. That's what he says. You have to be... Malchus means Lowliness meaning understanding the root of evil that's in me. I understand, I accept it. If I can't accept it, I can't control it.
The Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day of the year,
Yeah.
what are we learning? About all
Right, that's
sorts
what he
of
said.
relationships.
Yeah.
Why?
Which are forbidden.
Because we are human beings and they're attracted.
And we're attracted.
We have to try and control
Right,
ourselves.
right. And he says here that this we read on Rosh Hashanah. Why in Rosh Hashanah? Why do we read this on Rosh Hashanah? What's the big deal? How is this connected to Rosh Hashanah? Because Rosh Hashanah is when you make God king. To make God king, you have to get rid of the evil. You at least have to acknowledge that there is evil in you.
First step.
Okay? Otherwise, how are you going to make him king? How is there going to be sovereignty? What is it? You're saying Hashem is king, Hashem is king. No. What does that mean? If it doesn't translate into your ability to control yourself, to expel the evil as a first step, it doesn't mean anything. Ishmael, again, he represents, just as much as Avram represents the higher loving kindness, Ishmael represents ta'avot ra'ot v'shorsham, all the evil inclinations and their roots. As it says, Kinyan lo ka'Avram she'yatza mimenu Ishmael. So Avram, it says that Ishmael came out of him. He left him clean, and all the negative went into Ishmael. But you see that the Ishmael represents all the negative that was in Avram. In other words, what we're saying is, Kabbalistically, that Avram is an example, again, in the symbolic sense, that chesed by itself doesn't work. It can't work. You can't just be all loving kindness.
So we always know that you need tiferes.
So, not just tiferes, you need gvura, that's what he's saying. You need
What's
here a
tiferes?
gershon.
So tiferes is chesed and gevurah b'yachad.
I said it. You need to balance it. First of all, you balance it by having gershon, he says. And the gershon means acknowledging the fact that you have an evil inclination and expelling it. And if you need to expel it 100 times, you have to expel it 100 times. What did Avram do? He kept going back into the desert and talking to Ishmael. Did that do any good?
How do you know that?
That's why he was at the Akedah. How was he at the Akedah?
Who? Ishmael?
Yeah, he was gone a long time before. Because he was still in contact with Avram. So what does that mean? Does it mean... Some people take it as meaning that if you have a rotten apple, you don't just throw it out if it's a person. You still have to have some kind of connection with it. To open a path back. That would explain why you took him to the Akedah. Why did you take Ishmael? He said, I did a bad job raising you. Because I had no gvura. And you needed a strong hand. So he says, here, see how strong my hand is? I can shecht your brother. Really? That's showing him a strong hand? You're going to shecht the tzaddik?
You're next.
What?
You're next.
You're next. Maybe. So that's Gershon. Umerari hu inyan ha-merirut. And you have to have bitterness also. Merari, the second family, it's the bitterness. Where is bitterness? So it's not gvura here. It's not like it's an aspect of gvura that appears as bitterness. The first one appears as expelling. There's the power to expel, to completely push away. The second one says you also have to have judgment in the sense of not just taking stock, but feeling bad about it. If you don't have any bitterness, and bitterness means I am distant from you, Hashem. I'm bitter because I'm distant. So a person takes stock of his life, and he feels bitterness that most of his days have been spent pursuing things that are not good. And he hasn't had higher will, as we said. His head has been detached from his body. And seldom is there really any enlightenment from the higher will in his life. Seldom does he feel that he is really pursuing his life's mission. All this because of his sins. Or because he has no sovereignty over his evil inclination. Or because of his past sins that have completely confused his spirit. Empty words. All his false loves, all the things that he loves that are nonsense in life.
So the Jews here don't get it. Yom Yerushalayim, they're doing a degel dance, dancing with the flag. Because the flag represents God. And then the Arabs come and blow to pieces and won't let them do it. They don't understand this is Hashem saying this is the wrong path. They don't get it. That's where your problem is. Your problem is that there's no Jewish chinuch in the Jewish people.
There's no ability to take stock. There's no ability to say, I made a mistake. I made a mistake. I treated this and this person the wrong way. I treated these people that live with me the wrong way. What's the wrong way? Like I have not been willing to separate the good from the bad. If you don't
Start
separate,
from the very beginning, you should never have set up a state in 1948.
Maybe.
It wasn't based on Torah.
Maybe.
Until somebody comes along and says, listen, we have to rethink and realize we have a Shem ahead and start again. Not just these emotive outbursts once in a while. We need Mashiach, yeah. And 10 minutes later, it's all forgotten. So,
most people will tell you that that's not. If there's any lesson that they'll learn from what's going on now, there won't be the lesson. Because it won't follow in their minds.
but it's only the Rebbe talked about Mashiach. Even to the Charedim and the Datiyim,
Yeah,
Mashiach wasn't something that was on the agenda. You know what happened in 1943, 1944? It said the Friedrich Rebbe was coming. You know what? There's a group of Jews who've come to live in America who really believe that there's Mashiach's coming.
Yeah.
Never heard of such a thing.
Never heard of it anywhere. But again, Mashiach is not a solution. It's a different way of solving things. It's not the solution. It's how you're going to go about doing things. You have to get the message across that there's another way. But another way in dealing with what? So in dealing with the Arabs, there's another way. But if you're not willing to face the fact that you have to separate between the good and the bad, you'll never be able to exercise that other way. That's what the Torah says. The Torah says you have to separate. There's always havdalah before you can live with something good. You have to first take out the negative. Anyway, we're getting off track. And here it just means a person is bitter because he's wasted his life. That's what he feels. Bitterness is not a feeling of remorse. Bitterness is, like he says, merari. It's like all the gvuros. It's from below to above. He's going to say that now even stronger. It makes you warm. It doesn't make you cold. Real bitterness doesn't throw you into depression. It doesn't make you sad. Real bitterness is a dynamic from below to above. It pushes you up. Because it says, I'm distant. I want to be close. Bitterness is, again, it's not, I'm screwed. So I'm distant. I can come close. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? And this also comes from Levi, Shorosh Gvurot, the root of Gvura, of judgment. Why? Because Mirirut u'Misod ha'esh, it's not cold. Real bitterness is hot like fire. It causes you to heat up. It causes you to have passion. It causes you to do something. And it awakens your warmth. And here he says it somewhere else. And so here we had shiflus and then merirus. They go together. Malchus and then merirut. ועל-ידי זה הוא בא לבחינת ומעלת קהת. לשון ולא יקטמים. שהוא לשון אספה וקיבוץ. כתרגומו ולא יתקנשון עממיה. דהיינו שמתאסף תקבץ אליו ליבו ורוחו ונשמתו אליו ויאסוף ממקור חוץ צוואר ברשבי אש ולהבת העולה למעלה. So then he comes to Kat. Kat represents that all the forces come together. Meaning that when you're under the rule of the evil inclination, you are fragmented. The cause is fragmentation. Now, usually we think that if you want to counter fragmentation, what should you do?
Take some glue.
So you need to find a glue. What's the glue? The glue is heat. Like in most things, so you want to put stuff together. The glue is basically a chemical heat. That's what it does. It melts two sides. If it's a good glue, it's supposed to melt. It has acid in it, and it melts the two sides of the things that are coming together. But when you need something even better, you actually apply heat. The more heat you apply, the more it melts together. So the gvura, which is like fire, it creates kehat. It creates a defragmentation. It makes everything coherent. It brings everything together. It's also what it means that eventually you come to understand why it was that you had to do all these negative things, because you couldn't come to the next stage without all the falls that you had. It's called the yiridat tzorech aliyah, that you descended in order to rise higher. Things come together. So this also comes from heat, from the fire of the Levim. And Kehat is the fire itself. Why is it called Kehat? Even again, Kehat, most people don't know what this word even means. You have to go to some verse, some poetic verse that Yaakov said, from that you're supposed to understand that he's going to gather people together. It means gathering, it means bringing things together. So why does it just say, why wasn't his name Yosef? It should have been Yosef. Then we would have known what it means. כי שם נאמר יחד שבטי ישראל שקבוצם נקרא אספה. אבל בהיקבץ בחינת שאר עמים להתאסף למקורם נאמר יקט מלשון קיוה. כי הוא עניין חריפות וחמיצות. Because when you bring Jews together, it should be out of warmth that doesn't melt them. It's something else. It's out of unity. And here we are talking about, he says it, out of acid, out of the heat that burns. So when you're talking about bringing together the aspects of yourself that have been affected by the evil, it won't be enough to just, you can't just sing Kumbaya and tell yourself, I'm all good. It doesn't work that way. There has to be a period of real bitterness followed by real heat. It's not this, it won't work. And when the person's doing tshuva, he says, it's not going to work by sitting there complacently saying, okay, now everything's fine. It doesn't work that way. You actually have to go do something that has fire in it. Okay, so it used to be that they used to fast. That's a good fire. Burns the stuff up. You have to do things with the passion. You can't just so there has to be charifut v'chamitzut, he calls it. Hot, charif is like hot. This is another word, basically in English. V'chamitzut, and acidity. The same way that the most tasty things in the world are those things that are hot and have acid in them, like hot tomatoes. Nothing better. If you don't make it hot, you don't make it spicy, which is really like saying acidic, it's not a good dish. That's what it means, that you take the bitterness and you turn it into something spicy and hot, and it makes it palatable, but it's a strong dish. And that's what it means to sweeten the negative. You don't sweeten the negative and call it sugar. It won't work. That is a big mistake in understanding what it means to sweeten the negative. To sweeten the bitterness, the only way to do it is to add spices. You can't be this nice guy with a bow tie and walk around and say, I'm done with my Yetzer Hara. It doesn't work that way.
Just 1 second. Are you running to me?
I hope we can. We're almost done.
I have to do some tomorrow I have to go to Henning, she's in Chevy.